That's Nick.
And that's Joseph, and today we're here to talk about the Postcard Killings, which opens March 13th, 2020, and was not waylaid by coronavirus. It's being released courtesy of RLJE Films, and was directed by It's the English language debut, actually, of a very notable director, Bosnia's Danis Tanovic. It stars Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Famke Janssen.
Who wrote this screenplay?
It's based on a novel by James Patterson, him of the Alex Cross fame.
Oh.
You know, Kiss the Girls, Long Time a Spider, and Alex Cross with Tyler Perry. Obviously a very popular novelist, but he co-wrote a novel with Swedish mystery writer Liza Marklund in 2010, and it was this novel, and it's actually been in developmental hell for many years, so it's switched hands many times. 2 years ago this was supposed to be a project that was going to be helmed by the notable cinematographer Janusz Kaminski, who of course lensed Schindler's List and many other Steven Spielberg titles. It was, originally was going to star Patrick Dempsey and Dakota Fanning and Connie Nielsen, and all these names have been attached for years, and finally it's come to fruition, and this is what we have.
So try to tell the story. It's about a detective played by
Jeffrey Dean Morgan,
who for a nanosecond I thought was Javier Bardem.
He looks about as ravaged as him now.
He's a detective from New York?
Yeah, Jacob Kanon.
Who discovers his daughter and her new husband, who are on their honeymoon in London, has been murdered.
Brutally murdered.
He goes down, or up, or to the side, across to London to identify the body, and takes over.
He takes over the investigation.
Somehow these foreign law enforcement agents let this alcoholic detective from New York come over and take over, which I think is probably the worst aspect of this story.
But it spans different countries. We go to there's Spain, there's the Netherlands, there's Sweden, all thrown into the mix.
And he is just he's just involved in all of it somehow.
Because the modus operandi of the killers is they're killing all these couples, and before the killings happen, law enforcement is receiving postcards with cryptic messages on the back, and the killings are mirroring the artistic
famous works of art
that are on the postcards.
That's about it.
As one character says in it about what the killers are trying to do is they're trying to destroy joy.
There are so many corny lines, and I should have written them down, but
I wrote down a few of them.
Did you? Oh.
Such as, so Jeffrey Dean Morgan plays Jacob Kanon as this very overbearing, demeaning, he's just a fucking asshole. Like, to the Swedish law enforcement,
He's a drunk.
But he has a scene where he's trying to get a flight somewhere.
Oh, and the poor counter agent at the airport is explaining to him, there's only one flight to Spain and it just left. So you'd have to wait till tomorrow. And he just has a tantrum.
Loses it.
Not thinking that obviously, airport police are going to come and escort his ass out. So stupid. So many moments that make no sense. But, so the killings are being done by these two people who present themselves as young husband and wife, but they're really siblings, and they're the children of this wealthy man who's currently in prison for a Ponzi scheme. So complicated.
Played by Dennis O'Hare.
Yes.
And that gives Famke Janssen something to do back home in New York by interviewing him.
So I feel like this film was trying to be maybe an installment of The Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter.
It feels very like a Nordic noir, and you do have the Swedish co-scribe, but it very overbaked, lots of psychological postulating that is really right.
We need to finish the story. So early on, the red herring, is that what we call it?
Yeah.
There is a man on a train, this overly attractive tattooed man who's kind of being a creep to the brother-sister couple and is following them. At one point he says he's stalking them. So obviously we're led to believe that this might be the person who is involved in the killing, but about a third of the way through, he's discovered to have been murdered with his wife. So ultimately it is that brother and sister duo who are basically, like, they had these traumatic childhoods which aren't really demonstrated. The only thing we actually see is that they grew up very privileged, but we hear stories of them having been abused, perhaps sexually, and maybe that's why they've become in love with each other or grown in love or whatever. They seem to have a romantic relationship. In the end, the detective, played by
Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who you've seen him in films.
I know he looks familiar.
You've seen him in Watchmen and that Ollie Bornedal film, The Possession, about the Jewish demon.
I don't mind him.
Dybbuk.
But I think his acting in this film is way over the top, and the dialogue is really bad.
The dialogue's terrible, and he's trying to give.
But anyway, we need to finish. So he catches up with the brother-sister killer duo team, and they're like in the middle of like the snow on a deserted road. They kind of get into like a collision. He chases them down. He shoots the boy, the brother. They have also captured their final victim, who happens to be a reporter played by
Cush Jumbo. Dessie Leonard, the Swedish journalist helping him. Well, she's an American in Sweden, I think.
She ends up being their last victim, so they capture her, and the detective is catching up with them. He shoots the brother and then goes to help the reporter. And she's like, aren't you gonna go, like, aren't you gonna finish these two off? And he's like, no, they won't get far. And then the final scene in the film is like, well, they did get far, they escaped. So they might continue killing. And that's how the film ends. This was not worth the hour 45 I spent watching it.
No,
However, I can see how the story, like the bones, are appealing. Because it's very generic. Like, oh, these people, there's a serial killer mimicking these works of art. It feels like it could have been a really good, like, 90s.
Pulpy. To me, the final result, which has wasted the time of not only the viewers, but like tons of people in the development of this film, and this is the end product. What I was trying to say about Jeffrey Dean Morgan earlier is that he seems to be always kind of not your first choice, but what people end up getting. But this reminded me a lot of The Snowman with Michael Fassbender as Harry Hole. That was a Plague production as well. But
nothing about this film was thrilling.
No.
Once we find out who the killers are, I didn't care.
No, not at all.
The scene where they're first being interviewed, because they happen to be in the same, like on the same ferry boat as another couple who were killed, so they're brought in for questioning. And the main detective guy is so convinced they're the killers, and it's just like...
But it's so why do you think that? It doesn't make sense to us at this point.
Yeah. The film does a really bad job of setting up any notion of like what might be happening. There's no suspense.
There really is no suspense. Initially, the setup gave me a vibe of like Paul Schrader's Hardcore, where George C. Scott plays... a man that goes to find his daughter who's disappeared in like the sex industry and the seedy underbelly of, I think it's New York, late 70s. Excellent vibe that film has. But quickly that dissipates into what this becomes. But the most entertaining part of this movie for me was listening to you watch it and all of the giggles at the
because
dialogue.
I was watching it with headphones on, so he could only hear me moaning and grunting.
Yeah, you do what's expected, I do what's needed. Jeffrey Dean Morgan smugly tells some law enforcement official somewhere. I also like this bon mot, love, pain, death, completion. It all makes perfect sense.
No, it doesn't, girl.
Ooh,
no, it doesn't.
But which, to me, this film had been on my radar for some years, and especially after Tanovic came on board as a director. Because he won Best Screenplay at Cannes for his 2001 film No Man's Land, which I believe got an Oscar nod for Best Foreign Language Film. He's twice won the Grand Jury Prize of Berlin. That's like the second place prize for an episode in the life of an iron picker and Death in Sarajevo. He's got a notable resume, and to have this be his English language debut.
I don't have anything else to say. I would give this film 1 out of 5 stars, and I only give it 1. I'm actually not sure why I'm giving it 1.
I'm not either. I give it the lowest because, as I've said before, I don't believe in zeros, but this is definitely a 0.5 out of 5 stars for me.
Wow. Should I change? No. Well,
no, stay
I'll stay at 1. Well,
Fine.
I'm not giving it 0.5 because I think The Bones could have made a good story.
I can imagine this was a ripe novel as well, but
well,
especially because I also read that Liza Marklund was sending her pages over to Patterson in Swedish, and they had to be translated.
Oh my God.
This whole thing feels like
a hot
jumbled mess of shit, and I just think that I don't know.
Are you done?
Doesn't work. Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.